Hello and welcome to the video. So this video was highly requested after I released the F-35 infographics video that I reacted to, and it was a few years old. So if you guys are familiar with the F-35, it had a lot of criticisms, and I read through the comments on that video that it's come a long way since then. So I'm very interested to check out this video today. It came out perfect timing. This one's by MEGAPROJECTS, the F-35 better than what you think. But I'm actually really glad that I checked out the infographics video first, because I could get kind of a background to it. I guess this video will explain the background to it as well, but I still don't regret watching the infographics video because it gave me a different perspective, and I think like no video is going to be completely perfect at presenting the facts, and like I always say, I take every video with a grain of salt. I know there's going to be misinformation in a lot of videos. Nobody gets it perfect. Things get outdated and things like that, so trust that I take everything with a grain of salt. I do take a lot of information from your comments though, so I do appreciate people writing comments, and people having discussions is really interesting for me to read as well in the comments. I'm very much looking forward to watching this, you guys. It's 20 minutes long, so grab a snack, grab a drink. It's going to be a long one. I am going to keep fairly quiet throughout this video so we can watch it together, and then we'll discuss it at the end. I did have a few comments saying like, stop talking through the video, and you're so right. You are so right. I should stop talking through the video. I need to learn how to screen record what I'm watching so I can pause the video and continue, but I will try to do that in the future. But for this one, I'll just keep quiet, and then we'll discuss at the end. So let's just sit back and relax and watch it together, and talk more about it later on. All right guys, let's get into the video.
An expensive jack of all trades, but a master of none. A rat hole of taxpayer money. An exceptionally dumb piece of Air Force PR. These are all quotes concerning the Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II, an aircraft which, safe to say, is the subject of some controversy, both from enthusiasts and also professionals. Indeed, you only have to punch F-35 into the search engine of your choice, and you'll be met with a litany of articles from across the length and breadth of the internet, all making the same critiques of the aircraft. The F-35 is no good in a dogfight. The F-35 is too lightly armored. The F-35 is expensive. Today, however, we're going to be donning the mantle of David against the Goliath that is popular opinion, and trying to present a different perspective on this aircraft. The perspective that actually is actually quite good, all things considered. Also, please do note that this video is the first of a two-part set in which we will present challenges and contrary opinions to popular narratives within the military aviation commentary community, with the other being on the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt, where we will argue the case that the aircraft is in fact much worse than its popular legacy would imagine. These videos should be contextualized though as thought exercises, not bold declarations of objectivity. The idea of the videos is not to convince you of the opinion being proclaimed in the video per se, although should these videos set you on a path to those conclusions yourself, that's great. It's rather these videos are intended to serve to demonstrate the exceptional subjectivity within the military commentary community, and to encourage you, the viewer, to be critical and take nothing you read or watch at face value. So with that out of the way, let's don our treacle waders and begin to take a sledgehammer to the tabloid headlines.
Oh, let's go. Let's see how this is. It's gonna be all bad stuff, right? About the F-35 back in the day.
In this claim, there is a kernel of truth, but one which has all context and nuance stripped away from it by media vultures hungry for clicks and the revenue that they bring, leaving the truth as naught but a stripped away skeleton to be callously discarded and forgotten. Now, it is true, the F-35 can't dogfight, or at least not as well as many of the aircraft that it's intended to replace, but this is because it doesn't need to. Technological advances have made dogfighting obsolete and antiquated as tactics in aerial warfare, akin to complaining that a brand new iMac doesn't have a floppy disk drive. nobody is disappointed. The claim that the F-35 can't dogfight appears to have its origin in a 2015 test flight report entitled F-35A High Angle of Attack Operational Maneuvers, 14th of January 2015, which was leaked by David Axe of War is Boring. At face value, this report, which contains the evaluation of the F-35's air combat maneuvering, dogfighting capabilities, appears most damning for the F-35, claiming that, quote, the F-35 was at a distinct disadvantage in a turning fight, and operators would quickly learn that it isn't an ideal regime. It wasn't effective for killing or surviving attacks, primarily due to lack of energy maneuverability. And indeed, this report is most damning, but as pundits and commentators scrambled to pump out quick and easy articles on the report to harvest those sweet, juicy clicks, they made a fatal mistake. They completely ignored the context of the report, that context being that this very specific set of tests was testing the F-35's air combat maneuvering capabilities, an obsolete battlefield capability that no longer exists, and one that it would never find itself using in real combat, unless something had gone really, really wrong. Now, going back to David Axe's original article to explain further, he discusses how, during the simulated dogfights, the report documented the F-35 struggling to orientate its nose toward a rear-engaging F-16 to score a gun kill, completely overlooking the fact that in the real world, the F-35, with its off-bore sight capabilities, which allow it to target and fire missiles from any angle, would likely have destroyed the intercepting aircraft without having to do any maneuvering at all. Going further still, it's likely that in a shooting war where F-35s were operating within their doctrine rather than a very narrow and specifically limiting test, intercepting fourth-generation fighters would likely never even get to within visual range combat distances before they were shot out of the sky by the F-35. Fifth-generation fighters, the likes of the F-35, F-22, J-20, and Su-57, have made speed and maneuverability all but irrelevant on the model battlefield as their advanced capabilities end an engagement long before the enemy can get into detection range. Sadly, it can only be concluded that, much to the disappointment of nostalgic and romantic commentators, dogfighting is dead. Modern aerial warfare is decided by who has the longest range weapons and detection equipment, and who can remain the most hidden while using them. And in this regard, the F-35 is a most terrifying prospect. The AN/AAQ-37 electro-optical distributed aperture system stuffed into the F-35's nose has a detection range of at least 800 miles, and this range is up to essentially unlimited when the F-35 is networked to supporting aircraft beyond this range. What's more, when this is paired with a cache of weapons that includes the AGM-158 JASSM with its up to 1,200-mile range, it's easy to see how, in the face of such advanced capabilities, the claim that the F-35 can't dogfight is a completely moot point.
That's so interesting. It's a great point.
Anyone who has spent any time browsing headlines regarding the F-35 has no doubt come across this claim. The media loves click-inducing and context-free headlines about the trillion-dollar aircraft.
Well, it's a lot of money.
But is this claim true? Is the F-35 really too expensive? Now, before we can answer that question, first we must settle on a figure for our titular aircraft, the F-35. Having that, we'll then have a benchmark with which to compare other aircraft. For simplicity, and to prevent this video from developing into a super interesting thesis on the economics of aircraft procurement, we're going to keep this simple and focus purely on the per-unit cost of the F-35 and its comparable aircraft. In this regard, it's actually quite a hard thing to put a finger on. Even with us ignoring the sunk costs of development, the per-unit cost reduces with every additional F-35 made as greater efficiencies from the ever-expanding knowledge and expertise of the Lockheed factory floor are yielded, and with 11 to 13 jets typically being made per month, odds are that any up-to-date figure penned in this video would be incorrect by the time the video has been edited and published, if it is even possible to really arrive at a truly correct figure for such a complicated thing in the first place. So take all of this with a grain of salt. Mercifully, though, we have at least some figures to begin working with, as the US government very kindly tells us some of these in its budget reports. Looking at those figures, there is no doubt that the F-35 was a monumentally expensive aircraft during the early stages of its production, with the first F-35A to come off the production line in 2007 costing an eye-watering $221 million. Since then, however, increases in production quantities, as well as the aforementioned increasing familiarity and efficiency of Lockheed Martin's factory floor workers, have seen this plummet to as little as $77 million for the F-35A models in the 14th production batch, a cost decrease of 65.16% per unit, with F-35B models dropping to $101 million per unit and F-35C models dropping to $94 million per unit. This decrease in cost has also taken place throughout the entire production run of the F-35, with the F-35s of the 14 production batch being reduced from anywhere from 12.3% to 13.2% compared to F-35s of the previous production batch. This decrease is also generally typical of reductions between most production batches. All of this finally gives us a current production cost which we can use going forward. $77.9 million for an F-35A, $101.3 million for an F-35B, and $94.4 million for an F-35C. With figures for the F-35 settled, we then need aircraft to compare it against, and to that end, let's start with fellow fifth-generation aircraft. Comparing production costs from different countries and economies is always difficult, but for purposes of this video, we were able to put a reasonably accurate figure on each of them. There are currently 4 fifth-generation fighters in service: the Chengdu J-20, the Lockheed Martin F-22, and the Sukhoi Su-57, and finally, the subject of today's video, the Lockheed Martin F-35. The first of those, the J-20, costs roughly $120 million per unit, and bear in mind that Chinese labor costs are lower than American labor costs, and for some reason, research and development costs were also lower. For some reason. The second of those, the F-22, cost over $230 million per unit, adjusting for inflation, and according to the Kremlin, the Su-57 cost $40 million per unit. This, of course, is nonsense. In reality, it costs somewhere in the region of $100 to $120 million. So suddenly, the F-35 isn't looking so expensive, but all of the aforementioned aircraft are top-of-the-line fifth-generation fighters, so surely even the cheapest among them must be monumentally expensive, right? Akin to choosing a Maserati over a Ferrari as the budget option. And in the same way that some would say that you don't need a Ferrari when a Kia still gets you to the shops, there are some in the military commentary community, such as Pierre Spray, who would make this same argument for military aircraft. You don't need a hyper-advanced F-35, or when for the price of one F-35 you could put up multiple upgraded or newly produced legacy aircraft. But well, is that claim actually true? To answer this question, we need to figure out how the cost of an F-35 stacks up against fourth-generation legacy fighters. And with the bold declarations already heard that they must be fractions of the cost, it'd be absurd to imagine they could cost the same, if not even more, than the F-35. Right? Well, actually, not necessarily. Let's look at a few examples to explain this a bit further. So we'll start with the Eurofighter Type 2. This makes a good comparison, as like the F-35, it was an aircraft plagued with highly publicized cost overruns. Like the F-35, it's a high-volume production fighter, with 517 aircraft having been produced for 9 different air forces, but unlike the F-35, it is firmly a fourth-generation fighter with no stealth capabilities and being built for hypermaneuverability dogfighting rather than for destroying its enemies from far over the horizon. So when, in many regards, the only difference between these two planes is their generation and the corresponding technologies and design philosophies, one would expect the Eurofighter to be significantly cheaper, right? But alas, it's not. Prices, of course, vary customer to customer depending on quantity ordered and other factors, but most credible estimates for the average price of the Eurofighter place it at about $120 million, nearly $20 more than the shiniest and sexiest F-35B. Make no mistake too, as much as we can point to individual, highly specific and largely unrepresentative of reality studies to argue the case that fourth-generation fighters are better than they actually are, and that correspondingly fifth-generation fighters are worse than they actually are, in real shooting wars, with all aircraft operating as envisaged, an F-35 would come out the victor over a fourth-generation fighter any day of the week. And just to prove we haven't hand-selected a uniquely expensive 4th generation fighter, let's look at another, the Dassault Rafale. Like the Eurofighter, it is a peak 4th generation fighter, and like the Eurofighter, it costs more than an F-35, with the final unit cost being anywhere from $120 to $160 million, depending on who you ask. Now, particularly astute viewers will note that both of the previously cited 4th generation fighters are modern and advanced fighters, really being more sort of 4.5 generation fighters. Better than true 4th generation fighters, but not quite advanced enough to be considered 5th generation. Now, this is the point that the Pierre Sprays of the world would kick in the door of the studio and start screaming hysterically about legacy aircraft, as the persistent belief remains in certain circles that modern air forces are best served sticking with tried and true legacy aircraft and simply continually upgrading them to save money. But is that belief actually true? To answer that question, let's have a look at one such aircraft, the F-15EX. This is the latest version of the venerable F-15, originally introduced all the way back in 1976. It is a hell of an upgrade for sure, and most certainly brings the F-15 into the 21st century with fly-by-wire controls, digital cockpit displays, advanced avionics, and new electronic warfare technologies. The cost of all this modernization, $110 million, or $136 million if you want the simulators, electronic warfare systems, and targeting pods to make the thing actually usable. Once again, significantly more than the cost of a brand new F-35, and all for an aircraft which is no longer top dog on the battlefield, and will find itself radically outmatched if it ever went toe-to-toe with a 5th generation fighter. So, the F-35 is not looking that bad, isn't it? With that in mind,
no, it's not.
Let's jump into our next rebuttal.
It's not looking so bad at all. Too lightly
Critics
armed.
of the F-35 will often claim that it's too lightly armed, having only one 25mm GAU-22A cannon and either 2 AIM-120 air-to-air missiles with 2 GBU-31 bombs or 4 AIM-120 air-to-air missiles. But while this isn't exactly untrue, the claim misses out vital context and supplementary information that show that in fact, the F-35 isn't too lightly armored at all. For starters, the F-35 only carries the aforementioned loadout while operating in its stealth configuration for operations such as initial seed operations when an enemy's air defense network is still very much alive and kicking. This would be highly dangerous for traditional non-stealth aircraft, and losses would likely be incredibly high, if they were to even operate at all. So therefore, the F-35 is only lightly armed while operating in environments traditional aircraft are highly unsuited for and would likely suffer high losses in any way, and indeed, it is this very light armament that provides the edge needed in such environments, as it maintains the smooth silhouette needed to maximize stealth capabilities. Sure, it would be nice to have more. There's always in war, you can never have too much ammunition, but in light of this full context, the point does seem rather moot. Furthermore, this humble loadout is not the F-35's only loadout, as when battlefield conditions are more secure, their defense networks have been neutralized, and air superiority has been achieved, the F-35 can be outfitted with a significantly expanded array of weapons in its so-called Beast Mode. This mode comprises an air-to-air configuration of 14 AIM-120 air-to-air missiles supplemented by 2 AIM-9X Sidewinder missiles, or an air-to-ground configuration of 2 AIM-120 air-to-air missiles, 6 2,000-pound GBU-31 bombs, and 2 AIM-9X Sidewinder missiles. Even the fiercest F-35 critics would struggle to call that loadout lacking. Detractors of the F-35 specifically, and 5th generation aircraft more generally, will often cite this compromise between stealth and firepower, saying that it proves the unviability of such aircraft, and they'll generally point to the 1997 downing of an F-117, the F-35's forerunner, by the Serbian military as proof of this. This moves out of the scope of this video somewhat, but as it is a criticism leveled against all 5th generation aircraft, it's still worth clearing up as part of the defense of the F-35. The claim usually goes that F-117's stealth characteristics were totally compromised when it opened its bomb bay door, which ruined its stealthy radar profile and led to it being shot down. But while this is part of the story, it's not the story, and it misses out crucial context yet again. For starters, the EA-6B Prowler electronic warfare aircraft that normally accompanied the F-117s to further protect them against ground radar lock-ons were grounded due to bad weather, which left the F-117 uniquely vulnerable. As they flew with radar antennas retracted during strike missions and unaccompanied, they were essentially flying blind. This operational failure was further compounded by the predictability of US flight paths, so when Serbia's surprisingly good overseas intelligence reported that F-117s were taking off unaccompanied, Serbian air defense knew exactly where to point their missiles and an ambush. Then, after all those other factors had compounded to create a uniquely unfavorable situation to the F-117, opening its bomb bay to fire helped create a bigger radar picture that helped to bring the aircraft down. Consequently, it can be seen that any attempt to use the 1997 shootdown as a claim that the limited stealth weapons load of 5th generation aircraft generally, and the F-35 specifically, make them useless, if not dangerous, in the real world is another moot point. That incident was caused by operational failure and overconfidence in design, not any fundamental flaws with the technology of stealth aircraft. So from this analysis, we can begin to see that criticisms that the F-35 is too lightly armed don't hold much water. They are arguments predicated upon taking the F-35 out of the context in which it was developed to operate and putting it in hypothetical situations in which it would never find itself on the battlefield, and then pivoting towards criticizing it in roles that alternative aircraft simply wouldn't be able to carry out at all. Having addressed the major criticisms of the F-35, namely that it's no good in a dogfight, it's too lightly armed, and that it's too expensive, hopefully now it's apparent, even if you completely disagree with the conclusions of this video, that assessing military procurement is not a black and white matter. It's a highly complex thing, which requires the full and true consideration of many differing facets in their correct context. In light of that, what we'd really like you to take away from this video is not necessarily a conviction that the F-35 is the best thing since sliced bread, but instead simply a conviction to appreciate that complex matters such as this rarely have their full nuance explained in a clickbait tabloid headline. With that in mind, join us for part 2 in this series, where we'll be taking a sledgehammer to that most cherished and lauded aircraft.
I cannot believe that it was 20 minutes. That went so quick. That was so interesting. I can't believe how quick that video went. I was so enthralled in this video, my goodness. This video was so well done, and I so appreciate this video. These are the kinds of videos that are so important for myself and other people to watch, because he's right. Like, there's so many I guess easy articles to write or easy videos to make about, I guess, like shitting on like a military equipment or like the next big thing. Like, there's a whole drama so people get their clickbait stuff going, and then it turns into just common knowledge, which is not even based on reality. So a video like this is so appreciated because context changes everything. I really love how this video was done. He explained all of the things that were said about the F-35, then he put in, you know, a fact or two that just changes the whole situation. I just learned so much from this video about the dogfighting aspect of it as well, how it's not really like a present day way of war these days. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is such a great point. 35 doesn't even need that because it's got other technologies. Like you said, it's like us complaining that a MacBook doesn't have a floppy drive anymore, but actually we've got like memory cards or like USBs. Like, there's half of the people complaining that there's no floppy disk, but we don't need the floppy disk because we have the USB. It's more efficient. Wow, that was just, oh my god, it was such an eye-opener for me. Seriously. And I think it's really cool that I did watch the infographics video first, because it showed me the side of what he's trying to combat. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's combating those rumors and those lack of context stories. So I'm glad that I saw the other side, and I'm glad that I watched this one as well. And you know, like, even this video I take with a grain of salt, of course, but I just found it really interesting because a lot of the stories that just need the context. And fascinating, absolutely fascinating. It's definitely helped me see the F-35 in a different light, that's for sure, and appreciate it for the new technology that it brings, and also the fact that it, you know, it's lightweight or can't bring enough weapons or whatever, but there's a reason why, because no aircraft or no other aircraft would be going into these situations anyway. The only reason why the F-35 would be holding those weapons, or those lack of weapons, I guess, is because they're flying into airspace that is extremely dangerous and they're trying to keep their stealth. I don't know how to explain it, but that's how I took it. That's how I took it. So that makes a lot of sense. But of course, like you said, like the tabloids or people writing articles can just run with this like agenda, talking about it's a shit plane, it's a shit aircraft, it can't do this, it can't do that, it can't do that, it can't do this. It doesn't need to do those things. It doesn't need to do those things because it is built for the future of fighting in the air, not for the past. It's looking ahead, not behind. It's not looking to dogfight because it's got newer technologies. Anyways, that was just great. That was just fantastic. Sometimes I come across videos like this, I'm like, oh my goodness, one of my favorite videos I've seen. Just so eye-opening. So many great videos out there, you guys. I absolutely, oh God, I cannot speak highly enough. My goodness, let me know what you guys think down below. I hope you guys, yeah, let me know the feedback about like talking through the video. Do you guys prefer if I pause the video? Do you prefer if I keep silent throughout the video then talk at the end? Let me know, because yeah, some people prefer the pausing, some people hate the pausing. Let me know. I'd love to get your feedback. I've been reading a lot of comments recently. I've been down in the comment section reading everybody's comments and responding, so yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Guys, love this video. Give this video a thumbs up if you did like it. I loved it. I'm gonna leave the original video down below as well, so go check them out. Their YouTube channel is MEGAPROJECTS. They've got great videos over there. I've watched a few of their videos before. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this video today. By the way, if you didn't know, I do have a Twitch channel where I go live every single week on Thursday and Saturday at 8 PM USA Eastern time, so feel free to come join me over there. I will leave the link to my channel down below. It is free to join, free to watch, and free to chat, so feel free to come over there. Excuse the pun. Feel free to come over there. Excuse the pun, please. Cringe. Guys, thank you so much, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye, guys.
Be what I want, keep searching on, it's never enough. Cup after cup, blunt after blunt. I wouldn't get one if I could find a flaw. In the car, and I put it on my mama. And my bitch call, talking about some drama. I swear that